All right, guess I'm doing this. Oh my gosh, I'm already starting to get emotional. And I literally just hit record. I've been contemplating just like talking about this like publicly for a very long time now, like probably almost like up to a year. And just like sharing my own story and like everything that I've been through. But then, of course, I didn't for a really long time because I was like, oh, well, I guess I was just like shamed and embarrassed of everything that I've been through over the last couple of years. Um, because I guess, and like I'll get into this, but like, mental health struggles can, sometimes often be kind of like a shameful and I'm getting a phone call. It can sometimes be like a shameful and embarrassing subject to talk about. So I think that's what really held me back for so long. And while even though I have, started to try to like talk about it more online, I haven't really been super consistent. Um, when discussing this subject, mainly because it's still something that I'm going through, like recovery. It's not a one-stop, a one-stop destination. It's not a linear journey. It's something that you have to work on every single day. And I don't really think that it's ever something that you can fully accomplish 100% of the way. And I think the reason I, for so long kind of held back ever, expressing like my thoughts about it was because I was like, oh, what am I, to say something like I'm still kind of going through it. And I was embarrassed like for a long time, maybe I still am, of embarrassed of the fact that I'm still kind of dealing with this. But then I thought that what's been helping me along my own journey, my own mental health journey, has been kind of connecting with other people who have faced similar experiences, and that doesn't necessarily have had to been like a direct conversation that I had with them, but just even just like listening to them like speak, like podcasts, like videos, yeah, like Instagram posts. That's been helping me know that I'm not alone. And so I wanted to kind of share my story, my journey, and for any of you who are going through something similar, or who can potentially relate, for you to know that you're not alone in this, because I know that it can get extremely isolating. So there isn't really like an agenda for this video. I just kind of wanted to share whatever came to my mind at first, and kind of see where that takes me. The first thing I wanted to discuss, and this is something that I guess I subconsciously always knew about, but I never really like knew that it actually existed, and that's this whole concept of self-stigma. Obviously a lot of us are familiar with the idea of like, the mental health stigma. And, just like for a really long time, I think I tried convincing myself like, oh, it's like, the 21st century, obviously, like, there's way more open conversations about mental health nowadays. But not to an extent yet, I believe, in my opinion at least, in which many of us going through our own battles can like feel comfortable openly talking about it. And I think that the reason for that is because, and obviously this is just, all of my opinion based on my own experiences, because I don't believe that mental illness or mental health exists kind of like in a concrete, like description, like you either have this or that. I believe that it exists on a continuum, and that you're never really going to be on the same place on this continuum throughout like your journey. It may quite frantically, it may change every single minute, every single day. It's kind of this like process, this fluid continuum that's always moving. And I think that social media has kind of augmented, what we think a mental illness or what, like poor mental health actually looks like. And we kind of internally set these expectations like, oh, I'm not at that level yet. So, therefore, I can't say that I'm suffering or struggling. But mental health is such a personal and individual and unique journey, and it exists differently for everyone. So the first part of self-stigma that I kind of wanted to address is the fact that it does exist. And I think many of us don't seek the help that we need due to shame and embarrassment, and due to not thinking that, we're like deserving of the help, or we're not under the impression that I don't even know how to articulate it, because it's just like a constantly battle like going on in your head where you just think that you don't meet like the criteria. And I just find that it's unfortunate that this is kind of that preconceived notion that we have, when we kind of suffer in silence every single day and think we know that we're suffering, but yet we don't think that it's like to that bad of an extent in which we should probably like reach out to someone. So that was like one thing that I just wanted to put out there, because I never really like thought about this whole concept of self-stigma until I did like a mental health like a training course a few months back, and that was kind of the first time that I even heard of that combination of like self-stigma and like those two words like being put together. And I think just having that sense of awareness that, okay, maybe I'm kind of like like stigmatizing myself, I think that that's kind of good to have and be aware and mindful of that fact, because at least it allows us to like acknowledge that for our own like mental health, sake of our mental health. Something else that's kind of been on my mind is and I've been kind of exploring this, or like pondering about this like thought lately, but I really like don't understand. It's like why we kind of like lead ourselves to believe these like thoughts in our head that like may not have merit. And when I say that, well, I'm just like speaking from my own personal experience, because like as I mentioned before, like I believe mental health exists on a continuum, and sometimes it's just those like negative thoughts that kind of like take over our mind, our brains, and we just like start to like believe that. And I'm so guilty of this as well. It's like nobody even has to influence me. No, I don't even have to be talking with somebody like about this, and they don't even have to like plant a seed in my head. I could literally be like isolated from everyone for like days, and then just a random voice, I refer to that voice as Eddie in my head, just starts throwing these like thoughts into my brain, and I just start believing them and like feeding off of them. thinking that they're like reality and, you know, a representation of like the real world. And I just don't get like why we do it. Because it's something that I'm like very aware of. I know that it's just a thought. I know that there's no foundation for it. It's not factual. It's not, you know, based on any sort of evidence. There's no kind of rationale or argument for it. It could literally just be like a negative thought that enters the mind. And it's just like something interesting that I've been like thinking about, like, why do we decide to like believe those thoughts? And I'm sure that, you know, there obviously is some like data and like science, like neuroscience backing it up, like all the signals in our brain. And from kind of like, you know, like my own, you know, research that I've done and all of that, I do know that you know, our brain is a muscle. We can kind of like condition it to think in a certain way, and obviously if we're always just thinking negatively, we just kind of become like disposition to like only like focus on the negative. And a way to like change that is to like reframe your thinking and focus on the positive. But I think it's interesting, you know, to acknowledge that like we're literally in like control of our thoughts and what we decide to believe or not. And it's just interesting why I guess it's like easier to focus on the negative rather than the positive. And this is something that I, you know, battle as well, because I'm very aware of this fact. I mean, I'm articulating it right now. But I just wanted to like put that out there, because I don't think that makes any of us like dumb or stupid for being like aware of that fact, but still kind of like, you know, continuing to think that way. I think that it's natural, and, you know, like as I mentioned before, it's a muscle and it does have to be trained, and it's not something that you can like train overnight. It does take time to kind of like rewire your way of thought. So that was something else that I've just kind of been like pondering lately as well. Something else that I wanted to talk about, I heard this analogy and metaphor on a podcast that I was listening to this morning, on Real Pod with Victoria Garrick, and she had on a guest, Dr. Glenn Fox, who studies gratitude and the science of peak performance at the University of Southern California. And on the topic of gratitude, he said this one analogy that I just wanted to share, because I think it's so important for all of us to just like consistently, you know, like repeat to ourselves whenever we do have those negative thoughts that try to take over our mind. Especially in today's like day and age, you know, like of hustle culture, we're always trying to, you know, achieve like the next biggest thing, outrun one another, outcompete the person next to us. For some reason, like we've all just become like so competitive nowadays, you know, and always just like aiming for that next milestone. And I'm very guilty of this. I know, where I kind of like prioritize, I guess, like the satisfaction of outcompeting somebody over my own mental wellness. And that has negative repercussions in both the short term and the long term, because, you know, I always feel like everything that I'm doing is to almost just like validate myself to others. And I kind of want to change that way of thinking. And so I wanted to share this metaphor, or like the analogy that he described, because I really do think that it's important to recognize. And he said to basically think of like your life as a swing, and I'm obviously paraphrasing what he said, but the gist of the comparison was that, you know, when you're like going on a swing, like depending on like however much force you use You can go like super high and then like you'll come down, and depending on kind of like the angle that you're at, you'll exert a different type of like force to like, for example, like keep the momentum going. Or maybe you kind of want, maybe you're like going like too high on the swing, so you kind of want to take it a little bit easier, so like the next time you kind of push yourself like forward, you exert or you use less force. So you can like dictate, you know, like how high you go on the swing, like how far back you go, that sort of thing. And the way that this relates to kind of like your mental health, or like the place that you're at, like at your life right now, is that it's going to look like the momentum of your swing is always going to be different. And you don't always need to use like the same energy and the same force and the same momentum for every single, like, for example, like item on your to-do list, or for every single thing that you kind of like, you know, for all of the tasks that, let's say, like take up your day. And you have the ability to kind of like dictate and steer the force of your swing. And you don't constantly, you know, have to be like all the way at the top, you know, especially at, you know, like that point where maybe like you exert too much force, so then you may kind of like tip over and almost like do like a 360. And relating that to mental health, that's kind of what can lead to like burnout. And if the swing is our life, and we're, you know, sitting in the swing, and we kind of can dictate, you know, how we want everything to go, just, it's important to know that like you're in control, and you don't necessarily have to be going like 100% of the way like all the time. It's okay, you know, to decide for yourself, you know, depending how you're feeling in the moment, to only go like 50% of the way. Maybe like in this instance, maybe like 70% high like next time, maybe 80% high like the next time. And that depends on, as he was saying, kind of how you're feeling in the moment, like for example, like what your motivation levels are, like that sort of thing. So obviously if your like motivation is like super low, and let's say you're kind of at the bottom of the swing, like it's not going like super fast or super high, then you're not gonna be able to jump to that, you know, 100% motivation, or, you know, get to like that very top of like the swinging energy thing, because it takes kind of time, you know, to build up that momentum. Like let's say you get on, I don't know if any of this is making sense, but basically it's like you get on a swing, you need to do like a few like pushes until you finally reach the top. So if your motivation or kind of like your energy is kind of minimal at a moment, you shouldn't expect yourself to be able to reach, you know, like 100% of the way. It's okay to take your time to eventually like build up to that. But then, you know, maybe you're going like super high, and you know, you're feeling good, like the energy is there, the drive is there, the determination, then maybe, yeah, like you're on such like a high that you want to keep the momentum going. And in those instances, yeah, it makes sense to. But it's not going to be like that 100% of the time. You know, sometimes you're going to kind of be, you know, just like swinging like peacefully back and forth. But other times, no, you're going to be like going at it like full force. But it doesn't have to be one or the other. It could kind of be like a continuum, right? No one's going to take your swing away. You can kind of like, you know, dictate it and like swing on it at your own pace. So I just wanted to share that, you know, comparison or that metaphor analogy with you, because I do think that it is valuable, and it can give you perspective that you're in the passenger seat, or in the wrong analogy. You're in the driver's seat of your swing, and you're exactly where you have to be in every single moment, you know? If you're only like halfway through on a swing in a particular like moment in time, that's exactly where you're supposed to be in that moment. You don't have to be at the top, you don't have to be at the bottom, you have to be like in the middle. And think of this metaphorically, obviously. If you're kind of like just getting on the swing, so you're still like at the bottom, like near the ground, that's exactly where you're supposed to be in that moment of time in your life. And those instances when you're like at the top, just like going, like full at it, in that moment, that's exactly where you need to be. So I think that like the moral is that, as cliche as it sounds, but we really do just need to be more mindful of the present moment that we're in and not necessarily rush it. And I think the reason for that is because our relationship with time is just like so weird, and that's just like amplified because we have so much exposure to what other people are doing at the same points of time in their life. So our automatic reaction is to just compare ourselves and think like, oh, I have to be doing that too, even if it may not be aligned with like your area of interest or like what you want to do. And I know it's like easier said than done, but there really does need to be like we as individuals really do need to make more of an effort to stop basing our lives, on what other people are doing, and stop comparing ourselves, and just really focus on what brings us joy and happiness in the present moment. And this isn't something that you're going to figure out in a day. Even like 1 hour of that same day, you can be happy. The next hour, you can, be completely miserable. But I think that it's important for us to at least like recognize and acknowledge that, and like know that we're working on it. So yeah, I just wanted to just share that. This is kind of turned into a random tangent, but yeah, I just wanted to start sharing like more of my thoughts. And sometimes I have like different platforms or different ways that I want to express myself. Sometimes it's through writing, sometimes I just want to like chat, and it'll probably change. But I do think that in this sort of thing, it's scary, but it is kind of important to like be vulnerable almost, because that's when we accept kind of what's going on, and when we can finally like start taking the action steps that we need to move towards that positive light. So yeah, that was just what was on my mind today.